Several weeks ago, you told us what you think about the protests, including the so-called Women's March. Oh, you mean the clitoral parade? Yeah, so how do we stop them? How do you stop clitorises? Very easily. Trump can expand his business and solve all the country's social problems if he starts up the production of vibrators. For all those in clitoris costumes, some even have male passports, he needs to give out vibrators with a big discount. And there will be no more social unease. What's more, he can drop them on ISIS and all that Islamic terrorism, and the conflict will resolve itself. Because the main problem of leftist and religious extremists in the US and around the world is the lack of vibrators. All right, but seriously speaking, how do you... I'm being very serious. It's physiology, it's science, it's medicine. It's very serious. You can write entire monographs on the subject, but I just summed it up in one ingenious idea. So what do I think about these extremists? They're criminals. They're imbeciles who come up to buildings, someone's private property, stores, shop windows, and homes, and they end up destroying things that cost hundreds of thousands of dollars that you honestly earned and now want to sell. It's your money, your credit, your food and bread, and they destroy all that. They're shitheads. They're proletariat. To understand what's really going on in the USA and Europe, you have to grasp that there are many different forms of civil war. There is never one form of civil war as in the textbooks. The red and the blue, the red and the white, that's too elementary. Everything has different forms. The flu has a million forms. Just imagine it's a flu, and this flu is a civil war. It's going on between the blacks and the others, because black racism is on the rise. It's going on between the neo-Bolsheviks. This, by the way, is my idea, that today in the world and the US, the new Bolsheviks have become active. Leftists are new Bolsheviks. If they win, instead of the most developed, most brilliant, and most free nation in the world, there will be a kind of new Soviet Union, a totalitarian nation, which means you won't be able to say what you think. Today, those who support Trump cannot freely express their opinion because they are instantly branded as fascists. They're forbidden to give lectures on college campuses. Just this week, the brilliant journalist, outrageous guy, and political writer Milo Yiannopoulos came to UC Berkeley to give a lecture. And there was a crowd of fascists, scumbags, and imbeciles who obviously started to break windows and demanded that the venue be canceled. And the police took him away, but not these criminals. What do you call that? This is what I call a civil war. The attack of the neo-Bolsheviks, the militants of the left. These militants are the enemies of civilization, peace, and citizens. And I think they should be run over by tanks, in the direct sense of the word. So you think there's a real civil war going on in the US? Yes, I've said so in the past 5 interviews, and before that I wrote it in the Kommersant newspaper, where I mentioned that if you look at the statistics, which most of you don't because you don't bother to read, but rather emote about everything, oh, Trump! Look how he signed that paper. It's so vulgar. And everything is just so wrong. Why is it that in the US, as in Europe, 90% of criminal cases are made against people of color? Think about it. Is that normal? Is it normal that the legitimately elected president, who hasn't even had time to do anything, already in the first days after his victory, crowds of imbeciles are breaking the private property of citizens by the kilometer, along entire streets? Is that normal? That is a civil war, don't you see? Now you're listening to my interview and cannot get a true sense of what I mean. Imagine you're sitting on the first floor of a building and all of a sudden the whole wall comes down. A brick is thrown right in your face, at the faces of your children and so on. That is a civil war. That's when you need tanks. By the way, Evgeny, I took a detailed look at Trump's recent refugee order that bans the entrance to US from 7 countries. To my surprise, I discovered that there is one peculiar detail. The order speaks about the impossibility of stay in the U.S. for those whose ideology or actions include violence against women, including honor killings. I'm just trying to use a little logic. It turns out that those lovely ladies who participated in the protests, they're defending their rights to be victims of violence? Is that it? How do you personally relate to the laws of those countries that actually do violate the rights of women? To understand the attitude of those clitoris-bearing women to Trump's recent order, you must know and understand the evolution of the human brain, including the evolution of the male and female brain separately. That's first. Second, this attitude shows us that no one even wants to understand these things, just as they don't want to understand Trump's politics. One thing is normal, the other is leftist. And the left automatically considers anything that doesn't have to do with its ideology as hostile. That's a fascistic approach. It's an ideological one, and where there is ideology, there is no law and common sense. And clearly, the countries that continue to reside in the Middle Ages, where people live not by secular law, but according to idiotic or even, by laws of a childish, premature religion, they're absolutely incompatible with the laws of modern civilization. But they keep on coming. They want to devour the free food, want telephones and TVs, want to use planes, all of it. And at the same time, disrespect those who produce all these things. And the leftist degenerates, for some reason, want them to have all this despite their disrespect. And so on one side, we hear Trump say something wrong about how he touches women, and on the other, you can cut off women's heads because it's some sort of a tradition, a wonderful multicultural tradition. Looks like schizophrenia, idiocy, and nonsense to me. Leftists are sick people. But this does not pardon them of their crimes. By the way, what do you think of Madonna's anti-Trump speech at the women's rally in Washington? She even used obscene language. You mean to say she dropped a couple F-bombs? Well, what can I say? An elderly woman under the professional brand name of Madonna. She professionally jumps around stage and it sells. She's a workaholic. At 50, she looks like she's 32 and a half, if you look from afar. And this is wonderful. But you must all remember what a thing show business is. These actors and stars are all dolls who have their own puppeteers. They pronounce texts they didn't write. That what you love and appreciate them for is not their achievement. Their texts were written by scriptwriters, playwrights, and writers. They did not put themselves in that place. They did not develop their style or image. This is done by producers and/or directors. For her to keep that stunning look, scientists invent everything that is needed for plastic surgery, for Botox, for acid injections, for skin cleaning. This was all invented not by her, but by scientists. She doesn't have the brains for it. It's done by doctors, not to mention the makeup, the Photoshop. For her to appear on stage, a large number of scientists need to first invent sound and lighting effects, computer technologies, so that all of her sweaty backing dancers can be properly lit up, so that other primates could buy tickets and come see the show. This is all one large product. But when she, by herself, with her small and empty brain, tries to pronounce a text in her own clothes, in her own background, we see an old, talentless foul-mouth in a knitted hat making an even more goof of herself. I repeat that as an element of show business, she is of a very high quality, unlike our ex-Soviet stars that just live out their lives. But you must understand, it's like a product you buy in the store. You must use it as intended. Use bleach to clean your house, not to drink it. So don't listen to her idiocy.